and welcome to this um, interesting lecture. On this day, 100 years ago, there was an ambush and a battle in Piltown as part of an ongoing campaign. I'd like to introduce Eoin Swithin Walsh, who's wrote an excellent book with a lot of great insights to the period, lives of people at the time, and that generation that lived through so much, from the European Great Civil War to the Spanish flu and years of strife in revolution, which makes our lockdown seem small, but we owe our freedom to them. And this is being broadcast on behalf of Piltown GA Club and the local community. And I want to thank the Dowley family, who gratefully allowed us to put a plaque on the site today. So I'll just hand over to Eoin, and hope you enjoy the insights in this. Thank you.
Thanks a million. Thanks a million, Rob. I just want to thank you all for having me today. Give me a shout there, Liam, if anything goes wrong. We'll try to rectify it. But just thanks for having me. It's first of all, it's good that you left the Munkind man on the Piltown GA Live website, which is no mean feat. So I want to thank you for that. Now, I'm half Piltown. My mother's from the Bog Road and Tubman Brown, the Longs there, Kathleen Long. So it's you know, I'm not a total enemy. But for anyone that's not from the Piltown area, I'm going to kind of focus on Piltown because I was originally meant to do this talk in Piltown just last year at the start of the COVID. So, but I'm going to try to apply, or I think this presentation could be applied to any village throughout Ireland to see the main events or how people contributed to the fight for Irish freedom. That's what I'm going to do in the first half of the talk, and then the second, the last part, I'm going to just talk about what happened in Bessborough and Piltown just on this day 100 years ago. So it's good that we're there today because it's exactly 100 years ago. So I'll just share my screen because I have a little bit of a presentation drawn up, and I'm going to make this presentation quite visual and give me a shout if anyone can see it. Quite visual, so just I think it leads to a better talk instead of me just reading it off. And also, I'm not going to I have no prepared script or anything, so I'm just going to talk through the PowerPoint. I think it flows a little bit better. But if anyone doesn't know, Piltown is very south of Kilkenny, just near the banks of the River Suir. Anyone that doesn't know the village, but you can see it there today. Not much has changed. So here's the bend coming in here, the bad bend, the black spot there. The hotel, this is a map from 1910, I should say. The hotel that's there is Anthony's Inn, which is still there today. No longer an inn or a hotel, but still there today. Believe it or not, there's Anthony's. It was a dispensary, and it was Anthony's Groceries as well. There was an old creamery, a private creamery here around 1910, and there was a pound. That's where you kept your animals. If they went missing or got lost, you just tied them up and left them there, and someone would eventually come claim them. The creamery that people know of today is now the Enterprise Centre. The old creamery is there in 1910. It had only been open a few years at this stage. There's a corn mill there where there was where the creamery is currently, and they give great information on what way the water flows and how far it floods up to the post offices here. And then the thing I want to talk about here in relation to the War of Independence in Piltown is the courthouse. So there was a courthouse for the whole of basically kind of the south west of Kilkenny, and it was based where the current Garda station is, the current police barracks is now. So and just a view of the main street. If anyone didn't see it, this is a photo taken it's on the Pool collection. It was taken on the 22nd of February 1905. And it just gives us a nice, Anthony's still looks the same. There's kind of big trees here. You can see people out on the road. And here's the building I'll talk about in a second. This is the courthouse, slightly different than what's there today with the Garda station. Here's a view from the other direction. So looking the other side, here's the courthouse again here on the left. You have the young people here, which I think it shows kind of Piltown was doing well enough because even all the young people, they all have hats on, which people who wouldn't leave their house without a hat, and they all have shoes on. And there's certain parts of Ireland in 1905 that certainly didn't, if you were going out, you mightn't be lucky enough to have shoes on your feet. But the main street is still a lot smaller and tighter, but I also say we give out potholes today. This is before an era of tarmac, Adam. and what you just had was muck. You know, you had muck, and it went hard in the summertime, and then you had muck in the wintertime, and it was just kind of stones. So it's an interesting one. Now, just in relation to Kilkenny, and this again can be applied to the whole of Ireland. In April 1920, and this is a GHQ, Michael Collins IRA initiative, they wanted any of the abandoned police barracks in Kilkenny to be burnt down to stop any of the Crown forces. So what happened is 1919 was a pretty quiet year in the whole scheme of things. There was lots of barracks attacks at the beginning of 1920. Hugginstown is the most famous, and that was set on fire. It was the third successful barracks capture in the country, as opposed to attack, but a capture where they got the battalion inside to surrender. And you can see here lots of the places went up in fire. Over 20 different premises were set on fire. Mostly in April 1920, but by June 1920, Piltown had one thing which was still there, the courthouse. And the courthouse was down here, and there you can see Piltown. But I should say, like, Monkine Barracks was burnt. That's a police barracks now. The Slate Quarries was burnt. Winegap, Glenmore was burnt. So Hugginstown as well, Ballyhale. So there was lots of things happening there. Part of the diktat from the GHQ and Michael Collins was, we need to stop the courthouses. Why? Because the legal system of the Crown forces was how someone made their presence known or made their presence felt. And so I'm just checking. So if you didn't, to break down British control or Crown control in Ireland, one of the first things you had to do was to stop the legal system. And that's and stop the policing system. Hence why barracks and courthouses were burned down. I should say, though, this is key to Piltown's story to war independence. Fiddown Barracks was kept in situ because it was more structurally secure, because it was a strong building, but also it was on a vital railway line between Limerick and Waterford, which was a lot more used than it even is today. And it was also, there was the bridge there, one of the key bridges in the whole of the kind of Munster area, in Fiddown Bridge, which linked over to the Portlaw side. So it was a very strategic point, hence why Fiddown Barracks was kept open, RIC. And then when the things got more troubled, it was supplemented with black and tans in that barracks to supplement the RIC that were already there. And just to go back to our courthouse, and this is the story I want to tell now about Piltown. You can check this out in your own areas where your local courthouse was, if you took in the region. But it had a lot of the districts within its remit. Here's a close-up of the shot we just looked at. Here's all the young people I was talking about. You can see the courthouse is fairly old building at the time. It's a lot higher than the police station would be at the moment. It had a porch, and also I just like this bit of the photograph. You can see some of the notices. So what would happen if there's any notice in Dublin Castle or whatever, but joined the army in the First World War, or if there was something bad or something, even like if there was the corona or the flu at the time, if there was a contagious disease, you'd get the messages up there on the posters. The type of court that existed then no longer exists in Ireland, and it was absorbed into the district court system of the new Freed State. So the local courts around the country, in the parishes around the country, don't exist. So you go to Kilkenny now for the type of things that used to be heard in these courthouses. Mostly these dealt with small things, small in nature, the crimes, if we call them, and usually with fines or short jail time issued. Drunkenness and disorder, not much has changed, was the most common thing that was heard in Piltown and most other of these local courthouses in Ireland. There's these assizes where Crown judges usually travelled, and this was another part of the War of Independence where you physically stopped the Crown judges and the jury turning up, and you warned the locals not to turn up to take part in the jury. And they were usually heard every quarter. And then the visiting judges who turned up in the likes of Piltown were usually supplemented by major landowning people from the area. And I'll show you an example in a minute, which I think is just beneficial. So here's the type of case we have one of the surviving registers from Piltown Courthouse. The latest we have it is 1915, because as I explained in a minute, they didn't exist, or the ones between 1921, 1919 mess an end. But this is an incident I managed to find that happened on the 23rd of April 1915, just to give you an example of what was heard in this court. And so that's 106 years ago. My maths is not great, but I think that's okay. Here, and just all is very interesting, but the court case was heard the 28th of April, so it's only a few days after the event happened on the 23rd of April. And the people sitting on the court are Captain Penrose, who I presume is the visiting judge, and you also have locals in Morris, who was in Clonmore House in Monkine Piltown border, and also Thomas Bowers and A.G. Bowers, who were from Piltown. So they sat on it. And now I should say that a lot of this was hangover from where Catholics couldn't sit as judges or couldn't sit in the jury. They could at this stage, but a lot of the time they didn't. And the guy making the complaint here is Sergeant William Byrne of the RIC in Fiddown. And he has brought up the defendant, the guy who's in trouble, is John Anthony of Piltown Village. And this is someone to back him up. RIC Constable Conway and Byrne are backing him up. And here's what he did wrong on the 23rd of April, 1915. The defendant on the night of the 23rd of April, 1915, at Banagher, which is near Piltown, in the said district, during the period between 1 hour after sunset and 1 hour before sunset, did ride a motorcycle on the public road without having a light. In accordance with the law at the time. So that was the law. If you had a bicycle or you had a motorbike, which Anthony had, which is quite rare in 1915, so Mr. Anthony was doing well, you had to have a light when it was dark, basically. He didn't, and he was caught by the RIC in Fiddown, and then that brought him up here. He was fined 5 shillings for his troubles and another shilling for the cost, so that's 6 shillings altogether. If he didn't pay it, he would be sentenced to Waterford for a period of 7 days, Waterford jail. So it's just an example of what's going on. And another thing which involved Piltown Courthouse, but also the IRA in 1920 and 1921, is what some of the Piltown IRA people were doing, was dog licenses, believe it or not. And we all love our dogs now in lockdown, and there's been a big increase in the ownership of dogs in lockdown. You can't get one for love nor money. But it was a job back then, believe it or not. And again, I'll show you, this is the register of dogs in the area, but it also shows you how far Piltown's remit. So if you're a local from this area, you'll know some of these townslands. Well, you can just see Thomas Adams and James Elward, Wilmson Powell Malina, I don't even know where that is. James Elward's from Boolaglass, which is up in Hoganstown. So it's quite close. You had you from Piltown, Knockmylan, which is up near Ballyhale, Beline in Piltown, Clonmore, Tubner Brown, James Barry there, Mansell Blackmore from Graig. So there is, it's a big spread Piltown Courthouse is in charge of. And even tells you, I just like this, the type of dogs they had. 2 dogs and 9 shillings is what you owe in the juicy for and even tells you their sheepdogs and the color of them. So it's very it's an interesting one. I just threw this one in just to show the difference in people that have bits. This is AJ Bowers Silver Spring, which is in Monkine parish, and I think the house was recently, the lands were just bought recently by the Walls, but he has 13 dogs, and the list of the dogs, be male or female, is here, and the brindle, the color of the dogs, and he owes £2 12 shillings for his dog. So it's an interesting one. But what happened when one of the things that happened in 1920 and what the IRA in Piltown were to do is to not pay the dog license fee to the Crown Court. So don't pay it in Piltown or don't pay it in the RIC barracks. And what happened in IRA locally raided the post office, that they were the people that were taking in the dog license money. So anyone that did pay the Crown Force ones, the IRA took it back off them, because they said that money should be going to the Irish Republic. And that's what happened. So I'm just showing you this, trying to give you an example of ambushes and all that are big and they're what make the news. But on the ground, these little things were very important to the rank and file. And it also it allowed people to contribute in their own way without, having to go off joining flying columns and all that. So there was a direct order. From IRA GHQ to destroy all Crown Courthouse, and Piltown was one of the last. And it comes up on the radar of Michael Collins in IRA GHQ. So he's a list of the ones that have survived and he's saying he's writing to the Kilkenny Brigade saying, why isn't this gone? Yes. The Piltown IRA at this stage are still in their infancy. Help is sought from the Monkine IRA. That's Monkine and Piltown working together. I know it's a big shock. But then the Monkine men request help from Waterford. Now, the Piltown could have done it themselves probably, but what you did is you always try to get the next door IRA company to come and help you. So they wouldn't be recognised by any of the locals, you know, so you buy in someone near you. And then the earliest hours of Sunday, the 6th of June, 1920, armed and masked men arrive at Richard Keating's house, who's a fowl dealer, and demand petrol, and the Piltown Courthouse was then set on fire. And this is just again, now I put up, so here's the courthouse. We don't have a picture of it destroyed, unfortunately, but you can see the Garda station. It's roughly the same print, so they probably used the foundations somehow, but the layout is slightly different. And the roof, as you can see, imagine the Piltown Courthouse would have had big high roofs with all the light coming in, and a balcony. You can see the balcony marks there to hold up the balcony here. You can, it's like that, but that's the main street in Piltown. Of course, there's the old creamery here. That was the private creamery. But also what I like is Anthony's, which was, people will know of my era as the Doctors. It was also a dispensary, as it was called, and also a shop, but very little. The building is the exact same after 115 years. And even it's like a ghost sign. You can still see just about the J.R. Anthony above the doorway there. And even the railings are the same. So that's a little bit of history that's still intact after all this time. A report was sent to Collins 2 days later by the Waterford IRA, believe it or not, and this was found in Michael Collins's paper. So Michael Collins has that many papers left. Of course, everyone knows Michael Collins died in 1922, but a secretary of his in 1924 had kept a big suitcase of files that she had kept and buried in her garden. And one of them that survived was from the Waterford IRA telling Michael Collins and Richard Mulcahy in Dublin how they destroyed Fiddown Barracks. They're kind of shown off a bit, just to make sure that they did their thing. So this is from the Waterford Brigade, and it's on the 8th of June 1920. So that's only 2 days after it happened. And he says, Cora, the captain of Monkine Company, the captain of Monkine Company called on me last Saturday morning to have my advice redestruction of Piltown Courthouse. According to the information he laid before me, I came to the conclusion that the military were about to occupy this courthouse, which was a pretty substantial building and capable of accommodating a full company. That's important because other courthouses in Kilkenny, notably Thomastown, was occupied by auxiliaries and Crown Force soldiers as well that were brought in from England. Captain Hogan, who's from Nicholastown, Monkine, the person to refer to above, informed me that some of the military officers were out inspecting the courthouse on Fridays, that's the day before. Hence, I naturally came to the conclusion that it's going to be taken over by the enemy, and I had no hesitation in advising Captain Hogan that the building should be demolished without delay. He agreed to tackle it that night, tasked me and two of my men who had the experience of this type of work required to be done, and I gladly fell into line, and I am now pleased to inform you that the job was done and is a complete success. Liam Burnock had signed, acting commandant of the Waterford IRA. So it's amazing that, you know, the likes of Piltown and that come up in the Michael Collins paper, but it might seem easy burning down buildings, right? You just set it on fire. But surprisingly enough, and this happened throughout Ireland, on first attempts, people found it hard to burn down. When you look at Piltown, it would have been an old building, very damp, old walls. It was actually quite hard to set on fire. And what I found out is the Waterford IRA in a place called Holy Cross in Waterford the week before had set their building on fire. And so they had become the experts at burning down barracks and courthouses. So it was a quick jaunt across the River Shore for these guys. And we also have a reference from William Keane of the Waterford IRA on his the time in helping destroy Piltown Courthouse. And if you can't see it, if you're on a small device, I'll read it out. I went by my bicycle to Piltown village, County Kilkenny. There was 8 men, there I met 8 men of the local volunteers, all of whom were armed with revolvers. They wanted me to help them in the burning of the courthouse at Piltown. There was no RIC barracks in that village, the nearest one being Fiddown. All the court registers for South Kilkenny were kept there, and this is important. And it was thought that the British would be very gratefully hampered in their administration of these records if they were destroyed. We got to work on the building with paraffin, petrol, gel ignite, and that's the key to me. having gelignite was a rare enough occurrence. That was gelignite was probably robbed from Hookhead Lowry's house in Wexford the previous a few months previously, and Waterford got a bit of it, and that a gelignite causes the explosion, which would set the building on fire. So that's a key thing here. And in a very short time, the place was a burning wreck. Before actually setting fire to the courthouse, we collected all the registers and papers into a pile into the main room. These, of course, went up in smoke with the rest of the building. Strangely enough, there was no sign of any of the enemy, although the flames from the burning building could be seen from miles around. And as I said, the RIC garrison at Fiddown Barracks was only a few miles away. So it's a good graphic to story. And we also have another one which came up in the newspapers afterwards. So the building, like all buildings at this state, or a lot of these public buildings were owned by the local landlord, because they had given the land initially, or sometimes they paid for the building initially back in the 1840s when the building was, and the 1850s. So Lord Bessborough, the local landlord, owned the building. The Bessboroughs were fairly decent landlords. They were quite liked. The Lord Bessborough, who was there in 1920, though, was quite old, and he hadn't been in Piltown for many, many years. So he was kind of like an absentee landlord at this stage. He was about 80 and he actually died at the end of this year. But we know that his solicitors and his people and his barristers were trying to get compensation for the burnt down building, which happened to the barracks all over Ireland. The local landlord sought compensation. The key to this compensation claim is it had to come off the local county council. This is the big thing. So these people didn't like this. So this came up. The Earl of Bessborough saw £3,000 compensation for the destruction of Piltown Courthouse on the night of the 5th, 6th of June, 1920. Major Max Bollum, I think that's meant to be, was the agent for Lord Bessborough, and he's the guy who was representing him. He gave evidence in the course of which he states that he could not form any opinion as to the parties who burnt the courthouse down. Richard Keesing, who was a fowl dealer from Piltown, gave evidence that on the morning of Sunday, the 6th of June, at about 2:30 a.m., 3 armed masked men entered his house and demanded petrol, which he supplied. And about an hour and a half afterwards, he's a fowl dealer, so he would have had a motorized lorry, hence why he has petrol. And about an hour afterwards, they said the courthouse was burning. After getting the petrol, they told him not to go outside for about an hour. Mr. Bacon is the barrister who always represented Kilkenny County Council, because they're the guys that would have to pay for this on local taxes. So replying to Mr. Bacon, the witness expressed the opinion that the raiders were not Piltown men, and that was what they were trying to defend them, that they could have come in from anywhere, which they did. They were Waterford / a few Monkine lads. Evidence to finding the courthouse demolished was given by Sergeant Law of Piltown. Now, the guy who surveyed the damage was Mr. John Hen Waterford, gave evidence of the damage. His estimate was £4,871, which is an awful lot of money back then. And Mr. Bacon, of I find hilarious, said back to him, he denied in cross-examination, that's Mr. Hearn, that what Mr. Bacon said, that he was the maker of the fastest estimates in the whole south of Ireland. You don't plead guilty to being higher than Mr. Reid. And Mr. Hearn said, I don't plead guilty to being higher than the value of the work anyway. They're saying that Mr. Hearn always inflated the figures to get more money. And eventually the judge said that the Mr. Lord Bessborough should be given £2,200 damages to be levied off County Kilkenny at large. That's the equivalent of, I would say, about 120, 130,000 euros in today's money. So it's not to be sneezed at in those times. But it's just an interesting, the whole story. And by the summer then of 1920, with the RIC barracks closed down, besides Fiddown, but with them missing in most rural parts of Kilkenny, the police can't enforce their race, or the King's race as it was called, in the land. So what happens is the local IRA start taking up police duties and start, investigating any crimes or anything that's happening, and they become well liked pretty quickly. I just picked one thing that came up, and this is the burning of hay and straw. Nothing to do with the IRA as such, but the point here is that the local IRA are the people who capture the guy who was responsible. So I'll just define this or describe it a little bit. A large quantity of hay and straw, the property of Mr. Thomas Carroll Carricanture, was destroyed by fire a couple of days ago at Mr. Carroll's farm at Ardclone near Piltown, County Kilkenny. On Saturday morning, the hay, straw and hay barn, who were actually owned by Mr. Reid of the sandpits near Piltown, were destroyed by fire. It is stated that the local Irish volunteers, which is the IRA, arrested a young man who admitted to having been associated with some of the hay and straw burnings in the district. A few things here. People were really happy with the swift justice that was often got by the volunteers, because they had people on the ground, they kind of know people. Hay burning was a big thing back then. If you lost your hay or your straw, you couldn't feed your cattle for the winter. And it usually was, and I shouldn't pick on this guy, but it usually was disgruntled farm labourers who fell out with the farmer they were working for or felt they weren't paid enough. So you used to set fire to the hay barn. It came up a surprising amount, not just in Kilkenny, but in other places around Ireland. And just before we go on, I want to talk, we're talking today about the Bessborough altercation, the ambush that didn't really happen, which happened 100 years ago today. But I want to just emphasize that there's actually 4 different attacks on the Fiddown RIC, not the barracks itself, but on the RIC that were based there. And I say RIC, it's mostly black and tans at this stage in 1921, because the regular RIC had left or resigned. So this happened the 29th of January. So this is just a few months beforehand. 29th of January 1921, on Tuesday night, the 18th of January, the police of Fiddown Barracks, County Kilkenny, noticed a body of men evidently preparing to attack the barracks and immediately opened fire on them. The attackers returned the fire, but the fight lasted only a short time. The police afterwards found 2 motors abandoned by the attackers. No casualties were sustained. Don't know a huge lot about this, but certainly there was people with rifles and shotguns. They were going to attack us, kind of like Hugginstown, except for we don't know how much explosives they had, but it kind of went by the wayside pretty quickly. This is a picture of Fiddown Barracks. If anyone doesn't know, there's not a huge difference in it today, but you can see it's quite, and this picture was taken in the 1910s, so it's a few years before the 1921. But you can see it had little turrets and little places you can shoot out of, you know, like a little kind of castle thing. And what happened here was in 1920, all this would have been sandbagged, so all the windows would be sandbagged. There was metal bars put in all the windows so people couldn't get in, and there was also barbed wire put all around the barracks, so you couldn't just walk in as easily as this, as nice and relaxed as the people are in the early 1900s. So it was a lot more difficult. But that's the barracks we're talking about in Fiddown. It's now a private dwelling house. And by the summer of 1921, the IRA is in Piltown, are up and running very well. And just to let people know, and I know depending on, we've got Piltown people here, but I want to emphasize this, but depending on where you were from, people are kind of proud, I would say, of their local company and their local battalion. So it's a different level in the brigade. There's a Kilkenny brigade, and there's 9 battalions in Kilkenny, and underneath the 8th battalion in Kilkenny, there was a number 6 different companies, usually made up the different villages around. And people see company was Piltown, and people are usually kind of proud, like a football team or a GA team, of which one they belong to. So that's why I know people don't really care about this nowadays, but at the time it was important. So here's Kilkenny and the different. This is the whole Kilkenny brigade, which is basically Kilkenny County. Piltown was down here in the 8th battalion, which is quite a big one, and the little villages named there are where the headquarters, or where the head guy was of that battalion. So Castlecomer, 3rd battalion was big. Graignamanagh was the headquarters of the 5th, and Thomastown was in there. Munchine was at the 9th, and then the one where Piltown was, the 8th battalion, was Hugginstown. Willie Farrell was the captain in 1921. Again, the Civil War that changed because people went different directions, but that was it. And what I'll do now is, just because we're here and there's so many locals on, I just want to go a little quick run through of who was in charge, just because there's a lot of relatives out there. And when I was writing my book, you can't include every name, and there's hundreds of thousands of names, I should say nearly thousands, that you can't include. So it's nice to just name them here. Here is the 8th battalion, who was in charge in 1921. The commandant was William Farrell. He died of TB, I think, in 1924. He got a bad doing during the War of Independence. He was from Ballynock in Hugginstown. The Vice Commandant, Nicholas Carl, he was present at the Bessborough ambush, helping out the Flying Column. He was also from Hugginstown. Pierce Farden of Golan, I pronounced that wrong, was also from Hugginstown. He was the adjutant, and the quartermaster, which is an important job, was John Carl of Brainer in Piltown. And these are the 4 lead figures of the 8th battalion at that time. And remember, it takes up a good few counties, and the quartermaster, of course, is responsible for sourcing guns and sourcing ammo for anything. So he's the guy that's in charge of that. The Templeorum parish then was C Company, as I said, and the 8th Battalion was subdivided as into C Company. So it just shows you geographically. People will know if they're from Kilkenny, the different areas that they make up. A Company was captained by James Welch of Hugginstown. So A Company was obviously Hugginstown. B Company, it also included John Hickey of Dunnamaggin. John Hickey is the Hickey people we're talking about, the hurler Noel Hickey. His grandfather, I'm not 100% sure, and from Danganmore. He died very young in the early 1920s. John Duggan in Battalion in Piltown, who was later the creamery manager in Piltown. He was the company company captain, who was kind of the head guy in Piltown during the War of Independence. John's daughter, Helen Duggan, is married to my uncle Michael Welsh in Battalion today, so I kind of know a little bit about them. So he was the overall head guy, and then just to show you geographical spread, D Company was Cassana near Carrick, E Company was Cool Hill, so it's Winegap, and John Kerman of Lemonstown was the captain of F Company, who was Kilmagany. So you can see how geographically it's quite big, and these 6 people with the other 3 would set up at battalion meetings to organise stuff and say what each area is doing. And by the end of the War of Independence, there was 32 signed up members of the Piltown IRA, C Company, Templeorum Parish. I say Templeorum Parish, definitely not Piltown Parish, but it's the whole parish, including Piltown and Owning. The level of activity, of course, of the 32 members would have been different. Some people done a lot of work, some people did very little, and some people were just called on when they needed it. But of course, the 32 do not include all the people from any area who helped the cause in any other ways. So that's people providing safe houses, people providing clothes, food, money, weapons, flexibility at work, because you might need a day off work to do your volunteer work. So it's just to be aware of that, so that these people, I'm going to list off a few of them now, because I just know that some maybe even children, if not grandchildren, of people that took part in the War of Independence who were watching today. So here's the 32 list of 32 guys who are part of the Piltown IRA company as of 1921. John Duggan, as I said, of Battalion in Piltown is the captain. John Murphy of Fanningstown, Piltown, is the first lieutenant, so he's second in charge. William McCarthy of Harristown is the second lieutenant, and so he's down the list. The adjutant is John Welch of Templeorum. Thomas Welch is the quartermaster of Currabally, and then they just mentioned John Carroll, who's the battalion quartermaster from Brainer and Piltown, but he wouldn't be involved at such a low level. He would have been kind of more high level. I just mentioned him. Richard Welch of Harristown, and this list is from the 30s, hence why so many people have died since. William Welch of Harristown, I was list out all the people that were there. James Nugent of Milltown, James Perr of Garrygog, Martin Marr of Garrygog, Patrick Grace of Curramoro, William Hayden of Ashtown, Michael Fitzpatrick of Raheen, Michael Shea of Mullenbeg, Nicholas Snowlin of Gary Duff, John McCarthy of Raheen, Thomas Larkin, who's in the USA in the 30s, I don't know where he was from originally, James Cudahy, Garner Ray, William Henry from Ballyglassoon, D. Carl of the Sandpits in Piltown, Ned Power of Brainer and Patrick Power of Kilmagany, who were actually part of Piltown. Ned Power of Brainer was in jail in 1921 because he provided a safe house, and he was quite involved in the IRA. A lot of people, included the likes of the Kilkenny Flying Column, Dan Breen, they all stayed at Powers of Brainer, which, if anyone knows, is a nice long avenue down the road. So it was well out of the way at the end of the bog road. Michael Buddy Welch of Springfield, he later, some of these became higher up during the Civil War. So he took the anti-Tracy side and kind of were promoted when other people took the Free State side. I think it's James Dwan or Quan, who was in the USA, James Dwyer of Fanningstown, Andy Dwyer of Ballincurry, Jack Kennedy of Castletown, Thomas McGrath of Fanningstown, Nicholas Fahey of Kilmanahan, Michael Murphy of Templeorum, and Paddy Sinnes of Harristown. And which is 32 is quite a good area. And not be left aside, Cumann and Mon were also quite strong in Piltown. The women's organisation had 15 signed up members, which wouldn't be average enough. Women often didn't sign up. They would help out in any way they can, but they just didn't become signed up. They never became signed up members. They wanted to do their talking without kind of signing up and paying their fees and perhaps appearing on the list and getting into trouble. this is the one we kind of care about. This is Templeorum Branch, so slightly different. It's the 8th Battalion. It's Piltown C Company, but they had their own branch called Templeorum with 15 in. And the captain of that was Mary Jo Cummins, knee power of Brainer and Piltown. She was later of Nilemile House. And the adjutant was Miss Cassie Power. And the treasurer was Mrs. Duggan of Battalion, Piltown, probably Jack Duggan's wife, I would say. And then just to let you know, there was the Hugginstown had their own company, and Mary Carl of Brainer and Piltown was the captain of Hugginstown Company. So I presume that's something to do with where they moved afterwards. I'm not sure. And then Tullahocht, Nano Mara was of Cassani. So there's those were the women that were in charge. And Mary Jo Cummins, knee power of Brainer, is the captain. And as I said, what the secretaries are, and then just the 15 members were listed, no addresses were given, and sometimes they refer to just by their married name with no first name, just absorbed into their husbands is often the case there. But the Templeorum branch of the Templeorum Branch of Cumann, very pivotal. Mary Jo Cummins of Nilemile House / Brainer was the captain, the overall in charge. Then you had Cassie Power of Brainer, Mrs. Duggan, Mrs. Haw, Mrs. Patrick, Mrs. Purcell, Mrs. Tenbury, Kathleen Cal, Mary Larkin, MK Welch, Mrs. Power, Maggie Carroll, Ellen Flynn, MJ Duggan, and Mrs. Murphy. They were the 15. Unfortunately, that's all we have, names and addresses. And it's just to be aware that Mary Jo Cummins actually she got one of the highest pensions of any woman in Kilkenny during the War of Independence. She became pivotal, especially in the Civil War, because she worked out of 2 houses as such, even though she'd married into a family up in Nilemile House. She was up and down all day, or else she had her sisters with her, or she was sending some of the kids, I think, where they were going between Nilemile House and Piltown, also feeding, clothing, and pushing the flying columns. Nilemile House is a very pivotal area, and her brother, of course, was down in Piltown, so she was able to link up there, especially when Ned Edward became captain of the South Kilkenny Brigade of the IRA in the Civil War. That's when her area became pivotal. And that's a picture of Mary Jo Cummins, which her granddaughter Laura Cummins kindly gave me a few years ago. And then just before we go on and talk about the Bessborough thing, I want to say that this is the 3rd occasion to Fiddown RIC Barracks for tax, and we have Buddy Welch's statement that he gave to Ernie O'Malley about this. But I'll just show you how it was reported first in the local media. On Saturday morning, this is in May 1921, Sergeant Sleepman of Fiddown County Kilkenny, armed men, the Sergeant Sweetman, Fiddown County Kilkenny, armed men called to his private residence and took away his 2 sergeant dogs, 2 of the sergeant's dogs, and shot them. Not great, but there's a more to that story, and I'll tell you what it is. But the plan was for the Piltown IRA, led by Jack Duggan and Buddy Welch, Michael Welch, to hide out at the sergeant's house and wait for him to come home. His house was a little bit away from the barracks in Fiddown, and to come back and to hold him up and get the weapons of the RIC black and tans off him. And we have Buddy's statements, and luckily we have them because Ernie O'Malley's notebooks, which are extremely hard to read, are in the UCD archives. But I gave up. I couldn't make head nor tail of them, but I just wanted to give a shout out to Arno Moynig, who is transcribing them, and he is making better look of it than I did. And just this is Buddy Welch's statement for what happened on this occasion, which is when they were attacking the police barracks. This RIC sergeant went home every morning, and 6 tans used to go with him as a kind of a protection escort. At 8 o'clock in the morning, he went home, and then at 9 o'clock in the morning, he'd go back to the barracks. So he just went home to visit the wife. Captain Jack Duggan of Battalion, Pilltown, took charge of this mission, and we left for the sergeant's house at 2 a.m. We took over the sergeant's house. We put his wife and child inside the house, just kind of held them up. We were to cut the connections between, or they cut the connections between Carrick and Shore and Waterford, so no reinforcement could be called. And then the barracks was about 1.25 miles away from the sergeant's house. We killed the dogs with a knife. Now, they're not just being cruel at this. The dogs were actually security, obviously, and they were there to bark, obviously, and give warning that there were people in the house. So they obviously had to kill the dogs to stop them barking or letting the RIC know that there was people in the house. There were 6 of us, the IRA, outside the house. The battalion quartermaster came against his wishes, for he belonged to our company. That's John Carroll. We had all the shotguns and small arms. Some GHQ hand grenades as well, which are kind of, they call them homemade IRA grenades, which probably came down from Kilkenny City. And we were to expect this party at 8 a.m. in the morning. We would give them hands up when they came. So this is the idea that they'd surrender and you take the guns off them without having to shoot first. We had other men outside behind the ditch, and there were men watching the back roads. These are scouts and the barracks to prevent a surprise and to avoid a surprise outside. They were men watching the back roads and the barracks to prevent surprise and to avoid a surprise outside so people didn't creep up on them. The scouts were to fire a shot if they were surprised by the RIC to alert those in the house. At around 5:30 in the morning, it was dark and a shot went off. We were to assemble in the bogs in a laneway a half a mile away. If this happened, they'd already pre-planned that. And when we arrived, we found that it was a false alarm. The battalion quartermaster had fired a shot. We were doing this against the wishes of the battalion. So you don't know what's really going on there, but there's a bit of politics. So the Piltown IRA company said, we're going to try to attack the Fiddown guys. The headquarters in Hugginstown are saying maybe don't do it, and it's probably something to do with they had their own strategy or their own plan, or they didn't want them to waste too much of the bullets or grenades if they needed them for something else. So that's usually what happened. But it's interesting to say the least, and you can see kind of the different things that happened at the time. But what we're talking about to finish off with today is that 100 years ago, this very day, the 7th Battalion, West Kilkenny Flying Column, came to Piltown. It was a Saturday back then, not a Friday. And the West Kilkenny Flying Column came to Piltown to attack the barracks at RIC, or to attack a patrol from the RIC. They had been active around Callan, the Callan area, which is originally where it's from. And they took part in the Nile Mile House, and just a month before in the Monarch ambushes, and also made a dramatic escape from Gary Ricken House the previous months, where they shot themselves, some of them shot the Flying Column, shot themselves out. At this time, they were led by Jim Leahy and Elward. That's the picture of Elward there on the right. The column linked up with the Piltown IRA, and they asked them for help. I think this is Jim Leahy's last attack in charge. Ned Elward took over after him, and he became the leader during the Civil War. But Leahy was in charge. He busted his fuss actually in Piltown, hence why he also got shingles, so hence why he kind of gave up on it, and then Edward became the OC. In total, there was between different sources, about 10 to 13 men at the column. Don't have the exact list, but you have a list of the original 15 or 16, so it was them. Now, Pat Welsh of the Namagan wasn't there at the time. People will know him, and I know Liam is doing something for his anniversary in May. But there was around 21 of the local IRA involved as well, which included some from Hugginstown, some from Kilmagany, and a lot from Piltown. And the overall plan of what they were actually trying to do that day was to ambush an RIC Black and Tan patrol on the main Piltown to Fiddown road. Oh God, Dowley's of Beach Farm, and it's not pronounced Dooley, it's pronounced Dowley. I got that right. I think it's a South Kilkenny thing. We kind of call people the names that are not actually their names, like Welsh and Walsh and Phelan and Whalen. It's the Dowleys of Beach Farm, which of course the family are still there, and which we put up, I should say, Rob Blackmore put up a lovely plaque today to commemorate this. And usually the Black and Tans would either walk or cycle between Piltown or only on a Saturday, and end up going to the pub either in Piltown or Templeorum. Eventually, that after their patrol, the ambush position was quite a good one, I think. Looking at it, and even being there today, it was a pretty good one because you couldn't see around the two bends, which is the perfect size for an ambush, with bends on either side, and then a straight stretch of road in the middle where you can attack. The ambush party arrived at Dooley's on the 23rd of April 1921. This morning, 100 years ago, at around 5 o'clock to 5:30 a.m. And we also know, because there was someone in the group that said they stayed in, a handful of them stayed on the owning to Piltown Road in case any of the RIC came a different route. They would have ambushed them from that side. And if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, here is an old map before the motorway or the bypass was put in, of Fiddown, which is down here. The barracks was just here. And we're talking about going towards Piltown, which is going towards the north, and it's a distance of 1.3 kilometres to give it the new one. And there's Dowley's of Beach Farm right here. So you can see this there. I think it's nice because it's a bend down here, which means that you're kind of on the ambush position before you're and there's a bend up here as well, so you're on top of them before, so you can't see too far in the distance. That's important, so in case any of the ambushing party can be seen. And here is a view that was taken in 2009. So this is the direction coming from Fiddown, the road we were just showing you there, facing towards Piltown. This is the direction they taught. Here is Dowley's of, and that old bull house is gone since 2009, but that was there 100 years ago, and it was along here the IRA ambush party was lined up. So you can see the straight stretch of road. And now if I stand here and turn the other direction, we're looking back down towards Fiddown, and there's a footpath along here nicely, and this is where we put the plaque up today. But you can see along here, here's Dowley's of Beach Farm, and this is the direction the RIC thought they'd go. And as you can see the bend, lovely. They come around the corner here, and they're in the ambush position, and they can't see too far ahead. That's what they used to do back then. And the IRA guys are on this side. They were on the Beach Farm side. One, for a good hasty retreat, but two, you didn't put IRA guys here and IRA guys here because you could end up shooting each other and hitting each other. And it's just what happened that morning is quite interesting. One black and tan came along on his own with a girl. He's captured by the scouts, and we think he was actually going to investigate a hen or a duck or something was stolen somewhere, and he came down with the girl for her to report this. He's captured by the scouts on his way back to the barracks, as it is thought that he could have captured or seen the ambushers, so they're a bit worried, and they catch him, and they hold him in they say a cow house or a cow shed in Dowley's for most of the day. The column hold is constable captive, and they will still wait for the patrol. By 4 p.m, so it's nearly 12 hours they're there at Dowling's farm, there's still no sign of the patrol of black and tans. So Lahey and Elward decide to retire for their own safety. And as we find out in a minute, it's lucky they did. They move backwards towards the Bessborough estate lands with the aim of moving northwards back towards Templeorum the way they came. The column first plan is to get some food though in the big house. They're going to go to Bessborough House, where the caretaker staff are very friendly to those fighting the cause of Irish freedom. As I said, the Bessborough, the Ponsonby family, Lord Bessborough's family, very rarely came to Piltown in the years before 1920-21. The older guy was there, and then the younger son didn't have much interest, that he was traveling the world at the time. So the staff there had much to run of themselves, and the parish priest used to help out as well to keep an eye on things. But they were great for giving food, and of course the Bessborough estate always had a bit of food, whether it be from apples to meat to potatoes to vegetables, and it actually became very pivotal in the Civil War. There's the Bessborough House, the original one that was taken around 1905. Beautiful building. The building that's there now, this building was actually burnt down to a crisp during the Civil War, and I think the only difference is the outer port is slightly different, but Lord Bessborough requested the Free State government built it brick by brick, the exact same architectural plans as the original. And in fairness, they did. It cost the equivalent of a few million in today's money. This is a beautiful house in Georgian fashion, 1740s. It was originally built, where all the windows are equal, and then they get different sizes but equal on the different levels. The chimneys have to match, always balance. Everyone has to balance off each other, and two beautiful colonnades coming out either side. And that's Bessborough House. So just to show you the retreat and what happened in the fight in Bessborough. Here's Beach Farm. Here, as I said, this is the road to Piltown. Just to be aware that this road, which I call the Cloncunny Road, this is all part of the Bessborough estate. People from this area will know there's houses along here now, but back then there was a good line of trees the whole way along. The Bessborough domain wall went the whole way along here. Domain, originally the Bessborough family owned 27,000 acres in Kilkenny, and the 27,000 was in the 1890s. They had, through the Land Acts and stuff, they'd given a lot of it back, but they still had a pretty large estate. And this is all part of it, and I'll show you this one again. So here's Beach Farm. Here, this is an older map, but you can see where the Bessborough wall went down here and went up then Here you can see this is a massive estate, and believe it or not, they call this place, which is all private now and houses, they call it South Park. The field up here was known as Deer Park because they used to have wild deers there, like Phoenix Park, for the Bessborough family to have hunting parties. So there's wild deer there at one stage. If you go here, we can see where the Catholic Church is in Piltown today. The old one is there now. The new one is here. And even directly across the road, where people know where the graveyard, the new graveyard is in, and the community hall, that was all within the confines of the Bessborough, the main wall. So you can see the wall. If you drive around here, you can still see bits and pieces of the wall still there. And just to be aware as well, we now know is a public road where Tennyson Machinery is located. That was actually a private gate lodge where you entered into the Bessborough domain and you were able to drive right up to the house that direction. So it was a massive, massive estate, even in 1921. But what happens though is the column did not know that the Crown forces had become aware of their presence early in the afternoon. The non-return of the officer definitely raised suspicions, but also certainly we also believe that somebody somewhere, whether trying to protect them or their own bacon, because if an ambush happened in your local area, there's a good chance your house could get burnt down or your sheds could get burnt down if you hadn't told the Crown forces you saw them there. But they somehow knew. They telephoned Carrick on Shore for the IRA Barracks in there, and soldiers in Carrick came out early in the afternoon and walked along the train line to get to Fiddown quietly, and they ended up going then and tried to do a circular route, trying to come in behind the ambushing party, which I'll show you in a second. And then in kind of a military pincer movement they were trying to do. However, the column had already began leaving by this stage, luckily enough, and the main bulk of the column head for Bessborough House to get some much needed sustenance, as I said. Having just crossed Ladies Bridge on these days, rifle fire and machine gun fire are opened on them by soldiers from across the field in a wooden area. So so what you have here is a bridge, Ladies Bridge coming across here. This is the older map, and there's Bessborough House up here. Beach Farm would have been down here, so they've gone through the Bessborough estate. Lots of wood. They've come out here. I don't know exactly where it is, but there's certainly either woods from this side, because I know the Crown forces came from both sides, but we don't know if they didn't arrive at the same time. But they ended up attacking the IRA from this side when they saw him by setting off a machine gun. But what the IRA did quite quickly is they were halfway through this field, the old Deer Park field, and they just went this direction down by the streams and explained their work. And so this is looking a bit more north. So there's the old house there. There's the village of Piltown here. Here's the massive Bessborough estate. You can see where the red line is. Here's the bog road along here. Again, the Bessborough wall is still a lot of remnants of the Bessborough wall along the bog road. And they managed to get across through streams and dikes and shoot back. They said they hit the machine gunner, but none of the IRA were actually hit, in fairness to them. And they ended up crossing the bog road and getting up north to Templeorum. It was a miracle in a way because two reasons. Basically, the British, if they were able to get down further to the beach farm, they would have had them trapped like rats in the barrel, fish in a barrel, I should say. But they would have had them perfectly captured. They managed to kind of leave just at the right time because the soldiers hadn't got down far enough down to surround it, made a tighter cordon. And certainly what would have happened is either some of them would have got shot, or certainly what would have happened is some of them would have been captured. They weren't shot. So it was an important maneuver to get the hell out of there, which they did. And also they had the British soldiers, where they set up the machine gun post, whether it was the unit hastily or not, it was on higher ground, and they had it. When you face trajectory of a machine gun, you have to get it right in the distance wise, and the bullets when they left off the machine gun just went over the heads of the men there while they were retreating. So the column is taking the direction of Dowling and Lower. Some actually they break up a bit, and some of them go over towards Canaspic and the Monkine direction. The column was on the right thing though, and leaving when they did. As I said, the column weren't ready to ensnare them in the column. The West Kilkenny Flying Column, though, did live to fight another day. They left their hostage behind as well, if anyone's worried about him. They moved on to Windgap after this, and they later had in May with Ned Aylward now in charge, an attack in Kilmanna and up in Tullaroan, where 2 members, including one who was here, Sean Quinn, lost their lives. And I just thought it was a nice time to, this is Ned Edward, and hopefully one of his sons is listening in today. Hopefully he's usually good for listening. He was one of the guys present at Dowling's farm that day. And I just think, instead of me talking about it, and I tried to get everything from different evidence, from reports to the Crown Forces to the guys in charge, but sometimes it's nice to just listen to the men who were involved that day and to get their synopsis of what happened. So these are the words of Ned Aylward, if you listen to me for a second. There was a patrol which travelled between Fiddown and Piltown, which we thought might be good for ambush. We came through the Bessborough domain and lay in ambush position. We were waiting all day. The only person who turned up was one lone black and tan who was in the barracks. He came along into our position and we captured him. I had a feeling that something had gone wrong when the normal patrol did not turn up, and fearing to remain any longer where we might be surrounded, decided to pull the men out. The 8 battalion men who were with us did not want to leave. In fairness to them, they still wanted the ambush. But when eventually we refused to stay any longer, they suggested that we should go up to the big house, the Lord Bessborough's house, and get a meal at any rate, since they came down the whole way from Callan. And we were crossing the stream of a place called Ladies Bridge, where the road goes through a belt of wood. Fire was opened from the woods. It seemed the troops from Carrick had been circling our position and were in the woods. We were in a bit of a dip in the field at the time, and the first bursts of machine gun fire went straight over our heads by a couple of feet. None of us were hit, however, and we jumped for cover, and we were encumbered, we were encumbered by our prisoner, the black and tan. There was nothing we could do but let him off, because he was a nuisance. We took him for a little while, however, for a couple of miles across the country. Then, faced with the alternative of either shooting him or letting him go, we decided to let him off at that point. He seemed to be a fairly decent sort of chap, and we did not like to shoot him in cold blood. His name was Carrigan, and he was a London Irishman. So that's Ned Aylward's version of events. And if I can just move on to one other guy, Ned Halley, he was important. Again, he became the Vice OC when he's from Callan again, and he became Vice OC of this flying column when Lahey went, and then Aylward became captain. And just to hear his words, everyone adds their own bit. Ned Aylward is very straight to the point. He doesn't dwell on too many things. He's not very sentimental. Some of the others give way more detailed statements. And he tells us that, Ned Halley tells us that it was actually Buddy Welsh, an officer in the Templeorum IRA, who invited the column down to Piltown. On the invitation of company officer Buddy Welsh, the column next moved to Fiddown district with the intention of ambushing a patrol of 8 or 9 RIC men who regularly were seen on the Fiddown-Piltown road. We were joined by about 20 men from the local 8th Battalion, and at around 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning, that's this morning 100 years ago, we occupied a farmhouse, Dowley's should be, but he said Dowley's, not me, of Beach Farm. Scouts and outposts were put out, and we made loopholes in the walls and loopholes in the laurel hedges, from behind which we proposed to launch our attack. About 9 or 9:30 a.m, we saw an auxiliary RIC man pass with a girl. He returned alone shortly afterwards, and on his way back to the barracks, we took him prisoner and interrogated him. He seemed a decent type of chap, and his story was an interesting one. He said his name was Carrigan and that he had a wife and 2 children living in England. He himself was an Englishman. He showed us actually his medals, and said he had served for 10 years, including the First World War years, in the British Army. He'd applied regularly to the England for employment. That's their version of the FOSS, or of the intro office. But each time we were told in the labour exchange to go and join the Irish police, where he would be paid £1 a day, which he was in the auxiliaries. This he eventually did, and he was posted to Woodstock in Sheeg to the auxiliaries. He told us then that he grew to detest his life in the auxiliaries in Woodstock, and he tendered his resignation, which was not accepted, but instead he was transferred to Fiddown RIC barracks. He guessed that we were waiting for the patrol, and he gave us to give the police the opportunity to surrender. So he asked the IRA lads, would you mind leaving my friends, the other police, surrender, which he was sure they would do if he gave them the option before just shooting them. We placed him under our armed guard in a hay barn. He was unarmed when he was captured, and there was no sign of any patrol coming. We evacuated Dewley's around 4 p.m. and moved off towards Mullenbeg, bringing that auxiliary RIC man with us. When passing through the Bessborough domain, what at first looked to us like sheep turned out to be British soldiers. They were lying down in an extended formation on a heist when we saw them. They were about 200 or 300 yards away. The auxiliaries saw them about the same time, which is a bit I found funny, and stood out on the path saying, "They won't fire when they see my uniform." Then came a volley of Lewis machine guns, followed by rifle grenades. And the last we saw of the auxiliary was when he threw himself for cover. Fortunately for us, the military firing from a height had not got the correct range, and their first clipped twigs over our heads, from trees over our heads, but we reasonably got good cover along the banks of a stream, for where we replied with rifle fire to the military using the banks of the stream for cover. We moved away in groups of twos and threes and reached the main wall on the bog road side, and crossing the road, we got up to the hills near Templeorum. One of, they believe the machine gunner was hit. And then if I can just give you one more, if you don't mind, I'll go to Jim Lahey, who was the OC that day in Piltown. That's him in later life, I should say, in the 1960s. He was captain of 7th Battalion Callan and also the OC of this flying column in Piltown that day. He said the ASU, which is the abbreviation for Active Service Units, which means flying column, moved down to South Kilkenny to the 8th Battalion area, where I was planning to ambush a patrol of 8 or 9 RIC men who usually on Saturday mornings patrolled a mile or so of road between the villages of Fiddown and Piltown. About 4 a.m. on Saturday morning, with 10 members of the ASU and 21 volunteers from Piltown, Hugginstown and Kilmagany companies, I occupied a farmhouse, Dowley's of Beach Farm. This house was about midway between both villages. During the morning, we cut loopholes in the walls and in the laurel hedges, which separates the road from Dowley's land, and from behind which I had decided we would attack the patrol. About 10 a.m, a black and tan accompanied by a girl passed along the road. Subsequently, I learned they were going to investigate the robbery of fowl. We expected the patrol to come around 11 a.m. And at that time, the black and tan returned alone. We took him prisoner and locked him in a room in Dowley's. We remained in the ambush position all day, and there was no sign of the patrol coming. So I decided around 4 or 5 o'clock to withdraw towards mBan and to take the black and tan with us. However, while we were passing through Bessborough domain, I noticed a gleam of sunshine off the steel helmets of British soldiers in extended formation about 200 or 300 yards in front of us. I drew Ned Elward's attention to this, and at the same time, the black and tans exclaimed, "There they are, there they are." We took cover in a grove, and as we did so, the British party opened fire on us with 2 Lewis machine guns and rifle grenades, which are like grenades that fly out of rifles, as you can kind of guess yourself probably. We replied to this fire with our own rifle fire. Then, leaving the grove, we moved in 2s or 3s to another position along the banks of a nearby stream, and using the banks for cover, we reached a wood. Passing through it, we came to the domain wall. Having crossed the domain wall onto the bog road, we moved up in a place called Dowling's Hill, overlooking the domain, and they could see the military inside Bessborough. With lorries coming in, they thought they were still trapped in the domain, and the IRA lads were long since gone, but they could look down and see them right into the evening. We continued on our way to mBan, where I dismissed the local volunteers and then took the ASU and stood on the path. Stood on the pass and made our way to Kilmagany. For this intended ambush, I made no efforts to isolate the barracks, and he's defending himself here at either Piltown at Fiddown. There was only a distance of a mile between the 2 villages, and to cut the telegraph wires would only arouse suspicion. So that's why they're saying they never admitted or cut telegraph wires or telephone wires so they couldn't ring Carrick, because if they did, that would automatically arouse suspicion and they mightn't come out either. We depended entirely on the element of surprising the patrol and then making a quick getaway. I have no doubt but the information of our position in Dowley's was given to police at Fiddown Barracks in time to prevent the patrol coming out. There was no injuries. In fact, I was the only casualty. For the day previously, I had given my right knee a bad wrench or twist, and it was causing me a lot of pain and trouble, and that ended Jim Lahey's War of Independence Day on the 23rd of April 1921, but as I said, it could have been a whole lot worse. And just to give you, I'm just finished now, but just give you a brief synopsis of how it was reported by the RIC to Dublin Castle. It says on 23rd, a body of rebels, and this is from their point of view, a bunch of rebels captured near Piltown Barracks a young constable on recreation. The rebels, numbering about 60, which is a complete exaggeration, being about 30 of a flying column under Dan Breen and 30 local IRA, lay during the day in an ambush for patrol from Fiddown Station. Receiving intelligence of their presence, the local police procured assistance from Carrick-on-Shore, and armed Crown force later engaged the rebels and dispersed them, recovered the constable uninjured and some of the rebels' arms. And they usually put even if they've got no arms, they'd say that just to make it sound a little bit better. Again, it's completely exaggerated, and Dan Breen was not present, but they just like to exaggerate the stories a little bit. And then the police media, and they reported to the newspaper, the Dublin Castle report was sent to the media saying further details of a surprise attack carried out by Crown forces on the band of Sinn Féiners, as they called them, near Fiddown, County Kilkenny on April 23rd, and their rescue from them of a prisoner and given is given in the police report. A mixed party of police and military were advancing across country when they surprised a party of about 50 armed civilians, what they call the IRA, were waiting to ambush the police patrol, which they expected to pass along the road at Fiddown. Fire was opened with a Lewis machine gun on the Sinn Féiners, who fled into a large wood. The Crown force pursued them and rescued the constable who would be captured by the Sinn Féiners early in the day. This constable said his captors were about to court-martial him when the Crown forces surprised him. He had been told that he was to be executed after he had been tried. The Crown forces carried out a careful search of the surrounding country, but all the armed civilians had fled, leaving a shotgun and some ammunition behind them. And they said that they weren't going to kill that soldier, but in fairness to the Black and Tan they captured, he gave no description of them. He said he couldn't remember, he didn't see what they looked like, and he didn't give any names either if they heard any names. So he kept his mouth shut. 2 weeks later, and just to show the aftermath of this, so what you had is the failed ambush on the 23rd of April 1920. The week after we had that thing, where the 2 dogs were killed, that was the week after. And then the week after that, you had the entire congregation at Piltown Mass searched, which is a big thing. This is on the 11th of May. This is in the newspapers. Crown forces surrounded Piltown Parish Church, County Kilkenny on Sunday last during Mass and searched the members of the congregation, male and female, big difference there, as they left the building. Female searchers accompanied the party. So the bad thing was at the time was to had to search females. We need female searchers, but also was also considered bad form to make females take their shawls off or take their hats off or whatever and search them. The Crown forces were right. The IRA usually got mass, which in fairness is usually true, on a Sunday. It was an easy place to arrest wanted people. A lot of people in Kilkenny were arrested, or IRA people were coming from mass, because they were very good at getting mass no matter what else was happening. And it was considered very bad form, as I said, to search people coming from religious service and also to search women. But why they're searching the women as well is if there were men going to meet up, any IRA men going to mass, planning, or give guns out, after mass, to hide it or pass it around, that they could have given to the woman in mass to hide it on the way out, and then they'd hide it in their shawls. So that's the reason. But they found nothing, we believe. But you can see though that emphasis is going on Piltown. That Piltown is now considered a bad area, where they had 2 bad weekends of it, the Fiddown Barracks, and they had called out reinforcements to do all the searches. But eventually, on the 4th time of asking, on the 18th of June 1921, which is just 2 months after or less than 2 months after we're talking about today, the RIC that were travelling from Fiddown Barracks to Clogger Creamery were ambushed successfully by the local IRA there. One Black and Tan, Albert Bradford from Essex, was killed there, and another was injured. And as I said, this was the 4th attempt to attack the RIC from Fiddown Barracks, and this time was fortunate for the IRA, not so much for the Crown forces. And there's the monument there at Sinnet's Cross in Turbert-Munckine today. And just to thank everyone, thank again Bob for having me. And there's the plaque that went up on Dowley's farm today. And it's great that people have done this to remember us. I know we've got COVID and we've got everything else, But if it wasn't done, it would be completely forgotten about. And what I think is great about the plaque or memorial is that as people walk past over the next 100 years, they might go, what the hell is that on about? And look it up. And hopefully in 100 years' time on this night, some of our great grandchildren will be commemorating the same thing. And it's because of those kind of memorials that they get to live in the memory even longer. So just thanks for having me. If there's any questions or comments, fire away, or some of the locals from Piltown may have other stories that I left out. But thanks again for having me, and sorry for going over my allotted time.
Brilliant, Owen. Brilliant. We have a few questions coming in on the text.
Great.
I'll just mention a few of them. Brilliant, brilliant. A lot of human stories, a lot of presentations about the burning of the courthouse, the searching at mass, and a lot of the general harassment and conditions that we forget now. And only for those people we would be, we would have Boris Johnson as our leader right now, and it would be an entirely different position that we were in right now. And people were living under a curfew, I think, at that time, if I'm right, and martial law. During that period of time. So we think we've had it bad. We've been pretty bad. Anya Welsh online there has just mentioned that you mentioned her, is grateful that you mentioned her relative James Welsh. James Phelan wanted to ask a question about the straw burning, which was quite interesting. Apparently some of the farmers may have been intimidated if they were selling milk to thieves in, which was a group in Carrick-on-Suir, but wondered if there was any kind of communist or other trends to that incident.
Not really that I know about. I've looked into, but basically I wouldn't say, is communist was the thing, or Bolshevik was what they were calling. But in 1920, just the year before this, and 1919, lots of the local farm labourers joined the union, the ITGWU, and this is unheard of before the First World War. And the reason that they did is that Kilkenny and Ireland went through a boom during the First World War because of all the food they were producing for the First World War. And the farm labourers got increase in their pay, and they got more rights. So they were often looking for more, more money, or, they felt that, you should be given a day off or an extra day off or a half day or whatever. So what you would have a lot of the farm labourers, and again, this is before tractors, or nearly before tractors. There was a few tractors around, and things like that. So you needed farm labourers to do anything, to plant stuff, to milk, to harvest. You needed labourers the whole time. That's why you see in the census there were servants living at the house, but the servants were basically usually farm labourers if they were men. And I don't know if it's a specific stand to this. Usually with the hay burning, so it's usually a local animosity. So it's usually either the two men I mentioned, those two farmers. It's usually one of those had fallen out with the farm labour, because they were always burning. There was at the exact same time there was another fire up in Dunnamaggin, and he got paid £300 compensation to farmer there for the. And again, it was someone literally down the road who had set fire to the hay barn again. And again, it's just this thing of fall out with the farmer. Farmers always thought like they were giving them too much money, and the labourers always thought they weren't giving them enough. So you often get this fallout. And I suppose with times before meal and, like to feed cattle, your hay and your straw were everything. And at this time as well, property was nearly worth more than a human life as well. So you often find, even more of independence, people getting killed. And they only get the family only get a few £100, but if they burnt their straw, they could get £500, or their hay. Like, so it's interesting. But I don't know. But it would have been a communist. That was what it called. With a small c, because all they wanted was workers' rights, and whatever they call it, they didn't care. But yet they would have found their voice a lot more.
Excellent. Two other short questions. Liam O'Sullivan, who set up this lecture facility and is a real find of the shutdown for me, the Trasna and Natira Facebook site and lecture series. Brilliant lectures, multiple sides of a lot of different things being brought up. Very insightful. Great thing to watch. He's asking about the bombs made from Kilkenny and whether they were made by James McMahon. And Stacia was asking if the courts were aligned to the electoral divisions.
The courts, yes, they were actually. To answer that question first, the courts were aligned to the civil electoral divisions, I think so. Piltown had it. I know Piltown electoral is different, but it was done on the civil parishes, which were a lot more. So like Clonmore was a parish, turbers in air places of parish, and they added them all in together. So yeah, it was the civil electoral division, if we call it that, was how it was done. Yes. So sometimes it's slightly different than the Catholic parish as we know it today. And the first question, the GHQ bombs, probably not made by Seamus McMahon. What happened is GHQ, which was Richard Mulcahy, Michael Collins, and the people there, sent a pattern down to local ironmongers, and Peter DeLucre usually made them, where he'd it was a patent, and it was very like the British World War I type bombs, and they showed them literally how to make the casing and the shells, and then you got someone else to put the gel ignite inside. So what would happen is every battalion, so John Carroll is the one in Piltown, everyone would have got a certain amount of these, because the Lucreys in Kilkenny usually would have made the casings or the shelling from, but there were also some made in Tipperary as well, in Drangan. And then someone else would have explosive material to put inside them. And sometimes they just put in, nails, and they put in, bits of their own explosives. With the GHQ bombs as well, it's like anything with guns. You could fire 5 of them, and 2 of them might go off, or 3 of them. You never really knew until the time. They weren't as efficient, shall we say, but they were still very, very good, and very good for the time, and actually kind of better than some of the weapons they had at the time, because they're very bad weapons at the time. The GHQ bombs turned out to be quite good.
Okay, very good. Seamus Duffy was just came on there with a comment to say he was surprised that there was an Irishman in the black and tans, and wondered how many there were. And second question.
Yeah, so he was London Irish. Yeah, so he was London Irish. So he was born. Yeah, so he had Irish parents. But there was black and tans, and there's a lot of kind of misinformation about black and tans and auxiliaries. Black and tans. Auxiliaries were a lot less. There was about 2,000, just over 2,000 auxiliaries in the entire thing over the course of the full 2 years, so a lot smaller. Black and tans would have been near to the 10,000 mark, but they were about, we don't know the exact figure, especially with the auxiliaries, because there's not an exact record left. But what someone did recently is took a chunk of a few thousand of them and found out where they were from. And there was about 15 to 18% of black and tans / auxiliaries that were Irish born, actually born on the island of Ireland. And the majority of those weren't up in Ulster. They were spread out equally around the country. Actually, Connacht, I think, was quite high per capita. And so again, to them, it was a very good paid job. It wasn't as much as the auxiliaries got £1 a day. You're talking £365 a year, hell of a lot of money. In 1921, the black and tans were paid maybe not half, maybe a little bit more, 2/3 of that, but still it was a good job. So you get people who are ex-soldiers who can't get a job after the First World War. Remember, unemployment is rife because the boom has gone bust in 1921, and it's easy to join. So about 18%, 15 to 18% are Irish born in the black and tans from all over the country. I even picked out 1 or 2 Kilkenny lads who joined at the time. And what else is I going to say about it? Yeah, so it was a decent job if you could get it for them, if you didn't have the qualms about. And this is why the IRA felt they were better, because they were saying, we're doing all this, losing our jobs, losing our lives, losing our livelihoods, free of charge for a cause of, i.e. freedom. And now these guys are coming in, taking money to go after us. So there was that kind of thing. They were the lowest of the lowest a lot of the time they were treated as.
Okay, Paul Brown came back with a question there, an interesting one. Was there any reprisals by the RIC after the events there? And Sheila Norris asking, did the Dowleys at the time suffer any reprisals, or were they actually a victim of being held in their house?
No, and I asked Tom Dowling today, and he said he did not hear of anything, which I'm surprised with. A few things there. First of all, I just don't know. Okay, because it has to be written down. What could happen is you could be terrorized, you could have a hay barn burnt down, or a cow shot or killed if you didn't cooperate with them. If they came raiding your house. A lot of houses were raided. I do know that much, that anyone that had any connection, they'd raid their house. So even like we'll say Buddy Welsh, they'd know, even if he wasn't in the house or he was on the run for a few months, they know where his mother lived, or they knew where his father lived or his sister lived or something, and they'd raid their houses to intimidate them to get to him. And so that's what they would have done, but I don't know how much damage was done. On to Dowlings, I'm surprised. I was hoping today that they might know, but they weren't. But the only thing I would say with Dowlings is, I don't know, they could have just put up their hands, even though they left the Flying Column. They said, "Oh, we didn't know they were coming," You know, nothing to do with us. We were held captive even if they weren't. And we knew nothing about it. So that you can play dumb even if you were thinking. And because they were close to Fiddown Barracks, I would say that Mr. Dowling probably knew the RIC to say hello to. And even their position where they were, if they were way up in the hills on Templeorum, I just think, this is on my own opinion now, they'd have no hope. Their house could be burnt down. But because he probably saw them every day and he kind of known them to say hello to, they were walking up and past his gate every day, they probably said, oh, look, we believe these lads. You know, that's only my opinion. I honestly don't know, but I would say they were close enough to Fiddown Barracks to have some kind of a nod, hello, how are you getting on? And it might have saved their bacon. As opposed to just being totally, and they weren't seen as being IRA before that anyway, or sympathetic, so they got away with it, luckily enough.
Okay, look, I just wanted to everybody on here to be aware that Eoin has written an excellent book, really well researched. You've seen the type of quality material tonight. South Kilkenny in Times of Revolution, an excellent read. You'll find it in the bookshops that hopefully are about to open again next week. I think a lot of facilities are opening allegedly. Yeah. So really good book. A lot of real good human stories, brings it alive. Fantastic research in there. I want to thank Liam again for setting this up tonight online, and recommend his channel Trasna Natira, and to thank again Tom and Thomas and Jill Dowley for hosting us, for giving us the site there today, and being great hosts in giving us that opportunity for the history that they were not fully aware of the full scope of the story, but you brought it alive tremendously tonight.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, a lot of thanks from a lot of people all over the place, including Iris.
Yeah, I know, and some people are giving me,
and loads of people here online.
Some people are giving me more information. I just want to thank them. So I see Thomas Larkin is actually from Raheen. It's good to fill in all them blanks because there's no way I can find that out. And someone else asked for all information online. There's lots of it. The military archives, pension, the witness statements, the newspapers are online if you pay a fee. Lots of different newspapers. And then the other thing is UCD Archives has the Ernie O'Malley stuff, and then the other thing, just in case someone asked me there, was the dog license stuff, and that register is it's in the National Archives in Dublin. Well, I think it's on findmypast.ie, but you have to pay a subscription to look at dog license stuff. If you want to know all the dogs that were in Piltown in 1915. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look. A lot of thanks there from a lot of people. Enjoyed it, and fantastic local information. You really brought things alive. It was wonderful, and this will be recorded. Liam has recorded this. It'll be on the Trasna Natira channel, and it'll be on the co-hosted on Piltown GAA Club, who gratefully helped me with the plaque, etc. So thanks again, Eoin, and thanks to Liam there in the background helping make everything happen. We might do this again, Eoin, next winter on another theme, because I think it was really excellent.
Oh, please God, yeah, please God, we'll be all out of it by then as well. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, it was really good. Thank you very much.
Cheers, best of luck. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.